new article with ProPublica in the New York Times. You can put this E1 up on the screen here. It's a deep look at the fluctuations in home values relative to regions in the country that are being hit or not hit by climate implications. So what this is doing, I think, kind of for the first time, is relying on a lot of data from the financial firm First Street, which tries to figure out, which direction real estate prices are heading for their own kind of internal commercial reasons. They teamed up with ProPublica and the New York Times to unload a bunch of their data so they could try to clock it by climate. And so what they found shouldn't be surprising to anybody, but has deeply profound implications. And we can actually put up E2. They have a couple of these maps that make clear what's going on. You can see the red there is basically a heat map of where you are screwed if you own property. And the clearer it is, the better off you are in terms of climate implications. And so what they're finding here is that over the next 30 years, they expect home prices to not rise very substantially on average. But when you break it out by climate implications, if you are in a place impacted by severe weather and flooding, you're looking at, over the next 30 years, something like a 6% decline. Whereas if you're not, you're looking at something like a 10% increase. The American dream has been built around the idea that home prices are going to continue to rise, that's how you build your wealth, and that's the wealth that you're eventually able to pass down to your family. Something like 2/3 of adults own homes, and more as you get older. And First Street is estimating that 5 million people will move this next year, significantly as a result of these climate implications. And they're saying that along with kind of location, seafront view, that kind of stuff, and public schools, like the quality of the school in the area, climate is becoming, for home buyers, something that they are now actively considering. Did anything in this surprise you? And more importantly, do you think the implications are going to be as profound as they're forecasting?
Yes, but probably from a different perspective here. If we put E2 back up on the screen, one of the interesting things here, we were just talking about Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Look at the dark red in southern Louisiana. Well, we were talking about what industries he takes money from. One of them actually is construction. And what's funny about that is almost a decade ago, I was working on a story about flood insurance reform. That really opened up my eyes to a lot of the ways that we had subsidized rebuilding in areas like that. And Cassidy was sort of opposed to this very conservative, ideologically conservative idea about flood insurance reform. And, in states like Louisiana, states like Florida, I remember when we talked about in Miami Beach when the condo complex collapsed several years ago. This is why I think the implications of it are going to be profound, because we've had these technological advances in the last 100 years that have allowed us to feel like we conquered nature and to build in these areas that are vulnerable when the climate changes naturally or otherwise. And whether you believe in man-made anthropogenic climate change, whether you believe in that or not, the climate changes. You don't even have to buy into the ideology of climate change to recognize that some of these developments, what's been built up in California. I talked to James Pogue and Leighton Woodhouse about this on Undercurrents recently. This is new developments over the course of 100 years that sprang up really quickly because we were able to build quickly, we were able to build close, we were able to build in these areas that required conquering nature. And so that if you're somebody who doesn't believe in anthropogenic climate change, the climate is going to change no matter what. So you have to have a plan for people's properties because that's important to them. It's what the American dream, it's the cornerstone of the American dream, literally the cornerstone of the American dream. So I totally agree that this is a significant, massively significant issue. And
the phenomenon that this article zeroes in on is the way that climate denialism, fueled by governments, has blocked, interestingly, the market from producing the signals that it otherwise would have produced that would have driven home construction and population dispersal that would have been more in line with climate developments. In other words, Florida is a good example. The insurance industry has been at the forefront of the climate science. Like, they're like, have fun over here with your documentaries pretending that climate's not real. Like, we have actual skin in the game, we have money on the line. We're going to study the actual implications of the changing climate. And they looked at these studies and they came back and they're like, oh, this used to be a 100-year floodplain. This is a 50-year floodplain. This was a 10-year floodplain. This is now a 2-year floodplain. You're going to get a flood every 2 years. Therefore, here's what you're going to pay for your insurance. So hazard insurance used to be, they estimate about 6% of your overall kind of monthly mortgage payment. And so it was relatively trivial. It wasn't something that people really factored in. Now it's pushing closer to 20 and is growing faster than inflation, which is the reason then that you have to factor it in as you're thinking about where you're going to buy. Well, people don't like to do that. People then complain to their county commissioners, to their state lawmakers, to their members of Congress, and those lawmakers say, that is really unfair of those insurance companies to be charging that. So we're going to subsidize it, and we're going to make a law that they have to do it, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so here I am on the left talking about the free market and its value in setting signals. And so then people are like, okay, great, thank you for that. We will build here.
But it's not just about signals, it's about people's physical safety. And I remember that I was actually talking to Sean Duffy about this at the time. This was when I was doing a flood insurance reform story. The NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Reform. Yeah, well, the NFIP subsidizes rebuilding homes in genuinely dangerous floodplains over and over again. So in Houston, for example, people who are like low income, middle income, who own these homes keep rebuilding because it's subsidized in these very dangerous places. And it's a not ideal situation at all. And so there's serious problems with the programs that you get incentivized because of crony capitalism to keep redoing and redoing. And Duffy was trying to lead the charge against it at the time. Now he's transportation secretary. But it does create these really perverse systems of incentives. And so the insurance system, I mean, I think this Times report is interesting from the perspective of like where insurance companies are coming down on this and how they're looking to influence government policies amidst all of this. Like, there's serious problems with, both people have genuine interests here in doing the wrong thing and genuine interest in doing the right thing. So how do you marry that?
Well, ultimately, things that can't go on don't go on. And so the numbers that they're adding up in this article, $250 billion for the LA fires. You can call it climate, you can call it poor fire management, you can complain about Gavin Newsom not open up the spigots for you, it doesn't matter.
All of this stuff is legit.
It's going to cost $250 billion with a B. On top of that, you've got tens, maybe hundreds of billions if you combine Western North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, these other storms that we saw very recently. You're very quickly getting towards $500 billion in damages there.
Right.
That threatens the entire stability and solubility of insurance companies and reinsurance companies. And they say that when the floodwaters recede, it's when you really start to see who's naked. And that we may find out that there are some budgetary gimmicks going on at the insurance and reinsurance companies, such that when homeowners with valid policies, I don't know if it's going to be this time or next time or down the road, but at some point they're going to go to this insurance company and be like, look, here's my valid policy, here's my claim, I need to be paid out. And they're going to be like, yeah, sorry, we're bankrupt. We don't actually have that amount of money because the actuaries weren't allowed to do the math accurately. And so we charged everybody less than we understood it would cost.
Yeah.
If we hit these worst case scenarios, and now we've hit them, and then you kick it up to what's called the reinsurers, who are kind of the backstop for the insurance companies. And once you're in that world, who knows what kind of counterparty risk they have and whether or not they're completely solvent either. And then you're back to the federal government needing a bailout.
Yeah, and so this is, again, the I guess, consequence of institutional trust, like having record low levels of institutional trust, is that you can't agree on the science, the capital S science, or as we call it, the Fauci, because it's sort of interchangeable. He is the science, and vice versa. But in all seriousness, when you can't agree on some basic, you can't agree on some like basic research, and it's been polarized and politicized, then there are all kinds of things that get affected by that, including like insurance rates and people's decisions about where to build and invest, like individual homeowners' decisions about these things. So we sort of think about institutional trust as a very abstract conversation. Like this is just something that the professors talk about with their tweed elbow patches, but it's really like consequential in people's everyday lives, and this is a good example of that.
Which, by the way, I understand why you would need elbow patches. I'm already getting a little faded.
You're going to
here.
come in next week with your elbow patches.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.